Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Would you please stand for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance? Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, we're glad to see that you gave up your holidays to be here on summer break. Your summer vacation is spent here with us this evening. All right. Superintendent, do you know of any changes?
We do have some changes. First of all, I'm going to pull 10.18 for no action. This will come back to you after some revisions. And in front of you is some revisions to the attendance rules. That's policy 5.40. This is based on some of the comments from board members at our workshop last week. And so we've captured that language. It is in front of you in green. I want to make sure you have a copy of that. That was placed on board docs, so that is correct as well. And then also in front of you, and I think it's also in board docs, there was a revision to the live stream contract 10.01. There was no substantial changes. It was just an addition to allow for more collaboration between the two entities when placing students. And also there was an error in, it said 9 students, and the word said 11, and the parentheses said 9, and it should have been 9, so we made that correction. Other than that, there were no changes to that.
All right, board, do you have anything that you'd like to pull?
Nope.
Nobody? Oh, good. Seeing that, then we'll move on to the approval of the minutes.
Recommend approval of the minutes from the special school board meeting, April 29th, 2019, the special board meeting public hearing on May 13th, 2019, and the regular school board meeting, May 13th, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Now to our district spotlight under representation.
And representing Ms. Owens tonight, we have Ms. Amani Williams here, and she's going to be showcasing our school-related employee of the year.
Lake County School District is a place where our students are always learning and growing into the leaders of tomorrow. It takes a lot of work to keep a school district running smoothly, especially one the size of Lake County Schools. While our teachers and school administrators are on the front lines working closely with students and helping them succeed, there are teams of other employees lending support in a wide variety of ways. Every year, we acknowledge our non-instructional support employees who are doing outstanding work and ultimately name one of them our School-Related Employee of the Year. This year, Jerry Griswold, a programmatic technical analyst for the district's Federal Programs Department, was named one of 3 finalists for the award.
When I help colleagues with technology, I first look at what they need, and I determine whether it's something that I can help, or I look at the ability whether they need to be taught something, and whether I need to sit down and fix it or be able to give them instruction, because technology instruction is vital with all people.
Sarita Morgan, a family school liaison at Treadway Elementary School, was another finalist.
The most fulfilling part of my job is to see a student walk in here and his shoes are about to fall off his feet. And I fit him for a pair of shoes. He ties them up, he stands in line, and he's got this big smile on his face, but he's looking down at his brand new shoes. That is excitement for me, because I know that I touched this child today in a way that he's going to feel good about himself in school.
Our third finalist was Nilda Rivera, an HR specialist at the district's main office.
When the Puerto Rican displaced residents came here to Lake County,
I went ahead and assist them with the job application, try to help them find a job. If they were not able to find a specific job they were looking for, I would go ahead and recommend for them to substitute with us as a teacher, clerical, food service custodian, just to get their foot in the door and figure out whether that would be what they would want to do, especially for the career changers. And then I also help them with any documentations that they needed, and I also refer them to different agencies, Hispanic agencies, for job training, ESOL classes, and so on.
All 3 finalists were honored at the Night of Stars, an award ceremony that was presented by the Educational Foundation of Lake County on April 17th. There, Jerry Griswold was named our School-Related Employee of the Year.
I just have a passion to learn all new technology. It's just, it changes from one day to next. What's new 2 years ago is now old, and what's new today can be old tomorrow. So,
Congratulations to Jerry Griswold. Thank you for all you do to support our teachers and students and to help make Lake County Schools a destination district. Lake County Schools is the destination district for providing students with individual opportunities to excel. Stay tuned for the next District Spotlight, where we will continue shining a light on what makes Lake great.
All right, that was great. And we have Ms. Griswold in the audience here tonight. Would you please stand? I would just like to say on my behalf, thank you for your dedication to Lake County and to the students of Lake County. Thank you very much. All right. Under public input, we have one card, and that is from Ms. Kim Cronin.
Good evening, board members and superintendent. I'm just going to touch base briefly on 9.06, the custodial for transportation. So I did talk with Mr. Carr before the meeting earlier today. None of the bus drivers or monitors are going to lose their positions. It's going to go through attrition the way we do the rest of our positions that we do this with. And it will be done on a daily basis. So in other words, at the end of this, we're probably going to need 2 custodians traveling around the county to do this. But if that's the way they want to do it, that's fine. Currently, we're paying $9 a day, 9 hours a day, to either a bus driver or a monitor to clean the portables of where they work. Okay. The other thing I want to tell you, I know most of you know that I'll be leaving for vacation. My vacation is always a working vacation, so I can always be reached by phone or email. All righty? Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Under reports, the Educational Foundation. Ms. Carmen Cullen Batt.
Chairman, board members, superintendent. Apple Mart stores closed on May the 15th, and we had 707 teacher visits this year, and that was a distribution amount of $53,025. The state matching grant went from $4 million to $5 million this year, and what that means for Lake County is we went from $57,000 to $74,000 in state matching dollars, so that was a huge success. The foundation received $10,000 from Hans and Kay Jacobson for increasing graduation rates for next year, and we also received $6,000 from the Dorothy Steves Trust to purchase backpacks. The foundation has decided not to do the backpack fairs this year. The parents have figured out that they can get the backpacks whether they come to the fair or not. And so we're going to be purchasing the same amount of backpacks and distribute them based on FTE to free lunch students in all of our elementary schools. Ladies for Education was held last Friday at Continental Country Club, and there were 71 players, and the event grossed $15,000, and $4,000 of that came from our caddy tips. Stepping Out for Education will be the 26th and the 27th at Mission Inn. We're already 70% sold out for both nights. Our stars, Superintendent Diane Cornegay, Nan Cobb from Cobb's Tractor, Elise Morris from Ernie Morris Enterprises, Chief Charles Broadway from the City of Claremont, Jim Miller from ERA Grizzard, and Representative Anthony Sabatini are learning their routines as we speak, and are real excited.
Sorry.
I'm cut off?
No. Kim was fast.
The winners of our CenturyLink Teachers and Technology Grants were announced on May 22nd, and Lake County received 6 awards in the amount of $23,082. And I'd like to invite Mike DeGraw, who is the Regional Operations Manager for CenturyLink Forward, to make the presentations. And we've requested that the teachers be here. From Lost Lake Elementary, received $1,800 for sound music technology for Ruthie Atman, and her principal is supposed to be here. Kelly? Please. If you can just stand right here, please. Okay, Eustis High School Robotics and Engineering Pathways. Richard Orris received $1,550, but he is not here this evening. Carver Middle School Building the Future Through Collaboration, Christine Clark, $4,873. And I believe Christine is here. Oak Park Middle Rising Stars, Kimberly Daly, $4,925, and she will not be here tonight. And we have Carver Middle School Dashing to Learn New Skills, Linda Franks, $4,934, and I believe she's here tonight. Okay. And Grassy Lake Elementary, adding Chrome to STEM education, Lisa Rowe, $5,000, and I believe Lisa was going to be here tonight.
I'll keep the 5,000.
Lisa Rowe would not let you, believe me, Lisa Rowe. And Mike, do you have anything to say?
Nothing. It's just always a pleasure to come and present these. In full transparency, this year, I think most of you've already got your check. We typically do a presentation, but we're just real proud as a product of Lake County School System. It's always a pleasure for me to come back and be able to give something back to the community. So on behalf of CenturyLink, thank you very much.
The next Foundation Board meeting is on June the 26th at noon in the district office. Okay. And Mike, I believe they want to congratulate.
He can lead them.
Okay. This way, please. Are there any questions for the foundation? No? Thank you.
And once again, we just want to say thank you very much for all that y'all do for Lake County Schools and the teachers of Lake County and the students. Moving on to our attorney report, Mr. Johnson.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have two things this evening. The first is we've had a request from a hearing from a individual who isn't eligible to have a hearing through DOA, so under our policy, we allow the board to decide whether they want to retain somebody to be a hearing officer. they want to hear the matter as an entire board, or they want to have one of the board members sit as a hearing officer. The latter is how we've done the last few. So just need some direction of which way you want to go and who you would be appointing as the hearing officer, Mr. Chairman.
When is the date that the hearing would take place?
We would set it. It hasn't been scheduled yet.
Okay. What is everyone's schedule like?
Oh, I can do it.
I'm good with the latter.
I already heard I'm not
You're
it.
good with the latter. I understand that,
Yeah.
but he says I'm the
Really,
one
what
supposed
day
to
is it
make the
again?
choice.
I'm busy.
I am out of town and actually out of state after tomorrow. I'm out of town, or actually the next
It wouldn't be
day.
until, at a minimum, 3 or 4 weeks from now.
Yep, I'll still be out.
I'm out. I'm out like 15 days.
I can do it.
After the 6th of July, I'm back in town.
But the vice chair just said she'd do it. I'm good with that.
I nominate the vice chair. Or I appoint. I guess I get to appoint.
You get to appoint me.
All right, Dr. Burns will take care of it.
Okay?
Good job. Thank you for stepping up.
No problem.
Does that make up for missing Monday?
It was a nice vacation.
All right.
Okay, the second item, Mr. Chairman, I want to talk to you for a minute about active shooter drills. When the law was changed, and what it was an amendment to 1006.07 last year, not 2019, 2018, when the act that generated all of the safety provisions began. There was an amendment to the statute relating to emergency drills and procedures. What it did was added the words active shooter and hostage situations, and then added the language that drills for active shooter and hostage situations shall be conducted at least as often as other emergency drills. When we got that language, you go back and look at the rest of the statute deals with emergencies for fires and natural disasters. And I've talked to Jimmer about how that was being handled in the past, and hurricanes, tornadoes, and bomb threats are kind of 3 different things, and during the course of the year, you're required to pick 2 of them to have an emergency drill on. So before this language was changed, there was one emergency, either hurricane, tornado, or bomb threat in the first semester and one in the second semester, so those 2 from the school for those emergency threats. Then there were 12 fire drills, 1 per month, and then 2 at the beginning of the year. And the decision became, how do you interpret the language? You have it for at least as often as other emergency drills. Some of the other emergency drills only had 1 a year. Some of them potentially could have 1 a semester. There wasn't really any direction when this came out as to how that was to be interpreted. I will tell you, Mr. Roy was campaigning for 1 a month because some of the sheriff's organizations were saying that's how you should interpret that language. And I'm the one who told Jimmer, no, I don't think so. That's not how I'm interpreting the language. And quite a few other school boards. We had numerous meetings about this particular issue, and my recollection was the ones that I knew of were somewhere 20 to 25 school districts were interpreting the same way as I did, was that at least as other emergency drills mean you did at least as other as once a semester, because that was what other emergency drills were doing. So we did it that way, and we were told to use common sense in interpreting the statute. I thought it was funny, too. But we were to use common sense. That was the only direction we got from the state about how to interpret that particular statute. And we looked at the fact that if we added the 10 active shooter drills to the 12 fire drills to the 2 emergency drills, we ended up, I think I came up with 24 drills per school in the county. That's all the schools. I talked to Jimmer about that too. I think with all of the LifeStream centers and the charter schools, conversion and others, that was 52 schools, plus 2 coming on in the future. I've computed there to be about 23 weekdays in a month, and so that's 2.25 schools a day, all month long, in order to be able to do those drills. Is what is being required. So, in the interest of interpreting in a way, and there was one other thing. At the time when we were asked to interpret this particular statute, there were a number of bugs, is I guess the nice way to put it, or issues with how the shooter drills were being conducted. There were the stories of the shooter drills where no one was advised of it, and children became very upset. And the thinking was that at least for the time being, until those that was another reason on the list for common sense to say, well, let's go with one a semester for now, assuming that the legislature would look at some of these issues which weren't clear and clarify them. Well, we have now received, as of May 31st, the superintendent received clarification from the Department of Education. And they, where would that go? The minimum expectation in law is that every school conduct an average active shooter drill at least as often as other drills are required. They then state that the Florida Fire Prevention Code requires fire drills be conducted monthly. So therefore, active shooter drills are required at least monthly at every school. Schools should consult with and work with the law enforcement agency that is the first responder to this plan and carry out monthly drills.
That's really.
So, no more interpretation by me is necessary. The Department of Education has now said, and by the way, to mine and Jimmer's knowledge, this was the first direction that we had received in writing as to how to interpret this particular statute. So, I think that I spoke to Jimmer, and the ideas for the new school year coming September, they'll be handled at 24 drills for each school for each month until something is interpreted differently. So I just want to let you know that that's where we are. And again, I should have listened to Jimmer. He was pushing for the sheriff's interpretation. It turned out the way to go. But there are some other matters. Just this is not the last time. We will hopefully get some clarification from the Department of Education on some of the other policies and things like that that we will need to complete in order to comply with the act. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
On the other part of that, you talked about that some were complaining because the students were not alerted. We're still not going to alert them. We're just going to do it.
I am
The
not
school will
aware of
know
the
it.
details of how the drills are operated.
Okay, we can find out later then. Okay. Anybody else have anything?
So to clarify, the tornado severe weather, that's once a semester?
Sir?
The tornado severe weather. So
Tornado, hurricane, bomb threat are, two of those you have once a semester.
So we're going to do 5 times as many active shooter drills
Oh, yeah.
than the severe weather
Yes, sir.
in Florida. Okay.
Is Jimmer required to be, or a district representative required to be at every?
Someone has to observe it, doesn't it?
Is Jimmer here?
He is here, and I know he's prepared to answer. any
Mr. Roy, would you come
questions I have
forward,
about
please?
this.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking all he'll do all day is every day.
Does someone have to observe this?
Yes, all drills have to be observed. So what the state statute did here with 7030 is they actually established this year for the first time that every school would have to have a security designated specialist. So that's going to be the person that will document the coordination of their drills. We've actually been doing that in the district for many years now, but the state said that that person will be the one that I will coordinate with to be able to do that. That way it alleviates me from having to be at a school every day for 2.5 weeks out of the month.
Okay, so we hopefully don't have to hire more personnel. It'll be school-based.
That I cannot promise.
Great.
I actually thought that on the fire drill part after Parkland, because that was part of the issue, that when he hit the fire alarm, kids came out, that I thought that was adjusted, that we weren't, are we evacuating the schools?
We still have a state statute for requirement for fire drills. The difference is in the past, we've always evacuated for every fire drill every month. We had done one, but the actual state statute says that you have to do 4 full evacuations per month. And then after those 4 full evacuations, what you have to do is at some point in time throughout that day, you have to complete your evacuation process. So it doesn't have to be done immediately, but after that alarm is sounded and it's silenced, then the teacher has to do some form of a verbal explanation of what their evacuation route would look like, go over, share that with the students, and then at some point in time throughout that day, they have to do an evacuation. So what we've done in the district to kind of pull out some of that fear of what that evacuation looks like is if a fire alarm goes off, they're given the opportunity to wait for 90 seconds. That way, the disruption will be settled. They can verify that everything's good. The school resource officer, deputy, and/or guardian will assess the perimeter of the campus, make sure the entire campus is clear. Admin staff will work on making sure the halls are clear, and then they proceed with that. So at that point in time, I've instructed anybody, since we have to do this by statute,
This is the fire drill you're talking about.
Yes, that is correct, sir. When they start that exit process, they kind of need to treat that exit process very similar as they would a run component of an active shooter drill. As you're walking down that hall, you've got to be quiet. You've got to keep the silence in the hallway. That way they can continue to assess. They can watch the stairways and they can watch their exit path so that everybody can be safe.
So we can combine the fire drill and the.
That was my question too. Yeah, can we just have evacuation day?
Yeah, it sounds like.
Sure.
I mean, if we're going to interrupt instruction, can we?
And so that is going to be what some of the plans are. We've actually talked about that. The last set of drills that we had conducted were the run drill. And when I conducted that drill with every school, every administrator, I sat down and I talked to them about what table talk exercises would look like to be able to do better preparation for drills. I also discussed with them how they'd be able to start to commingle some of these drills, knowing what the bill presentation was going to be for the active shooter drills on a monthly basis. That go ahead, conduct your active shooter drill, maybe do a lockdown barricade. 5 minutes into that drill, then go ahead and conduct your fire alarm drill. And that way we could take that 12-minute period rather than it ruining 2 days out of the week.
Right, okay.
And just a clarification, because you made a comment of 4 times a month, you meant 4 times a year. Full evacuation, 4 times a year.
It's four times a year, that is correct.
You
But
made
they have to complete the full evacuations 4 times.
For those listening at home at later, so that they are not,
Yes, sir. I stand corrected.
that's okay. I mean, you're nervous, that's all right. I gave him an excuse, okay? But no, I appreciate all that you do to make this safe in our schools. So, and I know that Mr. Johnson now wish he had went with your idea and never got with the state, but it's too late.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Anything else, Mr. Johnson?
No, sir.
All right. Moving on then to the consent agenda.
I recommend approval of consent agenda items 8.01 to 10.17 and 10.19 to 10.45.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, moving on to our discussion items. 11.01, the American Classical Charter Academy Charter Application.
The board, you had a chance on Monday to hear the presentation on behalf of the Charter School Committee. And you also had the opportunity to speak with representatives from the American Classical Charter Academy. So if there is no further discussion, I am ready to make a recommendation on this matter.
Please.
Okay. I am recommending that we support the committee's recommendation to deny the application.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I just want y'all to know that I did watch your very, very long meeting on Monday. So I'm up to speed on all this.
And also that we've already received an appeal before we even made this motion tonight. So that's kind of, threw me out of whack there. All right, we got a motion, a second, no further discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. 11.02, the Altoona School Incorporated Charter Renewal Application.
And they are here tonight, and along with them, I know that we'd like to introduce Mr. Trainer, who is a charter school financial consultant. We mentioned at the last meeting that Mr. Ward had met with them and made a recommendation that they hire a financial consultant. And this is an individual who he's worked with in the past and is very much a reputable individual and very experienced in working with charter schools and getting them on a strong financial path. And so he is here tonight. I know that there were some documents sent to you, and we also have the principal and the board here, as well as some other folks representing the school. They're all here this evening. Any of them you'd like to hear from, if you'd like to hear from Mr. Trainer, I know he's prepared to speak as well, if you'd like for him to kind of share the work he's done thus far and what his plan is moving forward with them. I know he's prepared if you'd like to hear from him.
Yes, sir, Mr. Trainer.
He's here.
Yeah. Mr. Trainer, if you would come forward. There you are.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Superintendent, board members. A couple of months ago, the principal of Altoona and I had an email exchange, and the crux of the matter was that the financial reporting of the school was not up to the standards that the finance department here at the school district wanted. So Mr. Smith asked if I could come and help the school present their financial statements like they're supposed to be presented, as well as help them with other matters and budgeting. And so we've been working with the school's accountants to adjust the current year financial statements and present them as they're supposed to be presented. And as the superintendent mentioned, you've received some information last Friday that gave you a synopsis of where they are at this point, and they have improved significantly financially through April. I did put a qualification in there that we know that there's going to be some accrued expenditures that happen at the end of the year, which will bring that number down, but they will still be in pretty good shape at the end of the year. So if there's any questions that you have, I will be working with the school. They have contracted with me to do their accounting for the coming year, so it will be easier for me to provide those statements to you monthly, because having to work through another accounting firm where all the detail has been tedious and difficult. But they've been very cordial and has provided all the information to me so that I could do my work. But in the future, I'll be doing the statements myself and all the work behind it, so I'll have all the detail and we'll be able to provide the statements that the district needs.
All right. Or you have any questions?
What was the change since April? Was it, I know that the principal mentioned like a $20,000 per month. Was it that?
I don't know what he meant.
Well, you said it was more favorable. The revenue had become more favorable since April?
Up through April. It's the 10 months through April. Their fund balance has gone from $33,000 to $110,000. And then we know it's going to come back down some when those expenditures hit at the end of the year.
And is that just FTE that?
It's all revenues that come through the general fund.
And much of it was,
Yeah.
per Mr. Trainer, much of it was the reporting that was in error. So the funds were there, the reporting was in error.
Okay, thank you.
Any sort of prediction on the, I guess, kind of a range of the fund balance percentage we might see at the end of the fiscal year? I know we can't pin it down precisely until the rest of the stuff comes through, but, you know, I mean, are they in a range acceptable to the state?
It appears in the past that the adjustments have been made by the auditors at the end of the year, that they have not been made by the accountants for accrued salaries, and there's also a district charge that comes through at the end of the year. So those look to be around $50,000 to $60,000. So you know, that will draw that number down that much, but any savings between now, and that was April 30th, so between May 1st and June 30th could also increase that number some. So, you know, we expect at least $20,000 increase over last year.
Would you predict that to be greater than 3% of their?
I didn't figure the percentage, but I'd have to go back and figure the percentage on.
Because 3% is the state threshold, right?
They're working towards that. In 2017, they were at negative 87,000.
Right.
So they have been steadily improving over the last 2 years. And through our budgeting process, we'll make sure that they keep improving over the next several years as well.
Okay, so I feel much more confident that they're definitely on the right path. Is there if we fall below 3%, then we through statute, will have to have financiers come in. Since they are below 3%, does the similar rule apply to them? Or do you count as the intervention?
Yeah, the 3% rule applies to the school districts. It doesn't apply to the charter schools the same way. They have other going concerns that their auditors look at. Have they had the ability to keep a positive cash balance? Have they been able to pay all of their normal, like payroll cost, benefits cost, et cetera? And their auditor will assess that at the end of the year. They will be below the 3% this year. I don't anticipate them coming out at 3%, but they are showing an improvement. In the past, even though they've been very lower than what they are at the present time, their auditor has never commented that they met one of the criteria for going concern or financial condition.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Thank you, Mr. Train. Superintendent, your recommendation?
I recommend that we approve the Altoona School Charter Renewal Application, Charter Contract, and Lease Agreement for a period of 1 year, giving them the year to establish a sustainable financial position and ensure that the improvement trend continues.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? Seeing none? I'm sorry.
You got a question.
All right.
And this one is in the lease agreement. I know some of our conversation, the previous workshop was about, this lease of a space that's ours, the property, and they're a standalone charter. Clearly, their financial state can't really afford to take on a lease payment necessarily. So this particular contract indicates that lease of $1. In the future, do we see that increasing as their financial position becomes more capable of maintaining a lease? I mean, any other standalone charter would have to go out and lease their property. And here, we, as a school district, seem to be subsidizing their operation.
In my mind, 100%, that needs to be considered. It didn't feel like comfortable right now to talk about because they can't do anything. But $1 for leasing space to a charter is just, it's not reasonable. But I think that's a discussion.
Yeah.
Maybe next year?
And this contract is for 1 year, right? So
That's correct.
So we can reevaluate in a year.
The lease, I looked at the lease too, it's 1 year.
No,
Right.
not reevaluate. I would say that if we're going to do something like that, we need to, by January, give them enough heads up that what this is going to look like for their next fiscal
I
year.
think it's totally fair.
You know,
Okay.
that way we're not cutting them short and saying, okay, you got to come up with this now, your lease is up. That way we've given them fair notice.
And it would even be reasonable that we would tier it, I think.
That's right.
Right. Okay.
Here.
Okay.
Well, we had a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay, 11.03, the tentative approval of the 2019-2020 Code of Student Conduct and Policy Guide.
Well, if you'll recall, we discussed this at length, many hours, this including the progression plan on Monday. If there are no further questions or concerns other than the language that I presented to you in the handout on the attendance rules, you can see the changed language there. If there are no questions or concern, I am recommending tentative approval of the 1920 Code of Student Conduct and Policy Guide.
Before you do that, Mr. Chairman, this matter before the board is the tentative approval of the 2019-2020 Code of Student Conduct and Policy Guide. If there's anyone here this evening that wishes to speak to this particular policy, then please come forward to the podium at this time. Mr. Chairman, I don't see anyone coming forward and believe it appropriate to close the public hearing.
All right. Board, what's your pleasure?
So moved with
Second.
comment.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question.
Okay, wait, we got a motion.
Let him go.
We got a second. Did you get that, Natalie? Okay, now any discussion? Mr. Mathias, you had a question?
I didn't have a question. I have a comment about this.
Okay.
So, as we had our marathon board meeting the other day, it seemed like went into the night. I was surprised to see an urgent update from the LCEA on Facebook that mentioned the discussion at hand, but it also said that it was stated in the school board workshop that it would be no problem for a teacher to come in early or stay late to help the student make up work that they missed. That obviously had some comments on Facebook, and I went back, and I rarely do this, but watched the board meeting 3 times, and that statement was never made. It was never made.
I watched the board meeting today, again, looking for that, and it wasn't made either.
I think it's outrageous that we would try and incite, because it was encouraging teachers to come and speak tonight. Now, we had an awful lot of conversation about it, and I would have expected the leadership to have gone through board docs and in their 3 minutes before the meeting to come forward and mention their concerns, not put it on Facebook. And we are always there after the board meetings, and I think superintendent leadership from the LCA meets with you once a month. It would seem reasonable that they would meet and discuss it with you, rather than use the tool of Facebook to incite whatever the reaction they were expecting, and to say that the message sends to our potential employers, and I think it meant employees, in Lake County, what they should expect from our students. I don't know, it's just, to me, it was very disappointing. So I would hope that there's more collaboration in the future, and that Facebook is not necessarily always the right venue when we're trying to do good work for our kids and for the district.
Dr. Burns, you had a question?
Yeah, I was trying to do searches and I haven't found it, and I'm getting confused between the student progressive plan document and the code of conduct. So if I am speaking in the wrong section, just let me know. But I wanted to follow up on a conversation I've had with a couple parents about the fact that we have in one of these documents the rule that in order to walk, you have to not have a certain number of absences. Is that in the student progression plan or the code of conduct?
I think it's school board policy.
Is it just a policy?
Yeah, I don't think it's, right, because the schools were requesting a waiver of it.
They were asking for a waiver.
It's in progression, okay. So my concern is, like, I'd like to follow up on that now that we've had 1 year and the kids just graduated. I'd like to follow up on if we, at any of our high schools, had children not walk due to that. There were none? Oh, you already know? Okay. Okay, because I wanted to follow up on how that worked out, because I had at least multiple conversations on whether or not it was fair and how it worked, and so it appears to have worked okay.
Yep, and all our students walked.
Okay.
Okay, anyone else?
No.
Okay, we have a motion, I'm sorry?
So I almost feel, based on the amount of discussion that ensued following that, the claim about what we were doing with the attendance policy, because that's code of conduct, right? The attendance policy and the revision of the language, that it might be worthwhile to perhaps share that language for the public who maybe, or the teachers who got word of this.
Maybe read it into the record. That'd be a good idea.
Because, I think that there was some conversation following that whether 9 weeks was too long or 2 weeks too long, or what do you do for this kid coming back from a test? And Superintendent, I think you've got a great proposal here on some new language that finds some balance in that. And so I think it'd be worthwhile for the public to hear that.
Yeah, so there was lots of conversation. I think we were all a little bit uneasy trying to figure out, how do you give teachers more flexibility when a child's been out, and as well as meet the needs of the child, so that they've been out 4 days, they come back, that we don't require that they take the test the day they get back, that the teacher has some discretion to make a decision in the best interest of the child. So we wanted some language that just captured the fact that we're going to trust teachers to do the right things for kids. And so the language now reads, and I want to thank some of the teachers who gave me some input today on this, Upon return from an absence or absences, students are responsible for making arrangements with the teacher to make up assignments and/or tests. Students may need more time depending on the length of the absence to remediate content or receive the initial instruction he or she missed. In collaboration with the student and our parents, teachers will establish the due date for missed work or test after considering the length of the absence and the instructional or remediation time needed to ensure student mastery of the course, content, or standard. Students shall earn full credit for all assignments, tests, and quizzes made up within the reasonable time limits established by the teacher. And partial credit shall be given for assignments not completed within the time limits established by the teacher.
I like that, and I really appreciate all the teachers that wrote, and, because as, like, I've taught in college students, which I think this really hit the high school teachers more, and so I understand more about that grade level, those grade levels. I was even, like, confused with the giving, like, what happens if you have a whole bunch of kids and they will come to you at the end of the 9 weeks and try and make up everything. And that could be a real problem. So I thought this was a really nice resolution to the problem.
Yeah, it just seeks to look at each individual situation and determine what's best in that particular case. I mean, if you've missed one day of school and the assignments given that day don't seem to be that significant of an undertaking, you don't need 2 weeks to do that, right? But if you've missed 4 days, you might not be able to turn that work in the next day. Or so that this, I think, allows folks to look at the individual circumstances and what's right and best in each situation. So
I think it lets the teacher make the decision. They have the decision-making process because they know the student and they know the situation, and then they can be the one that's in charge of what comes.
Is the absence, is that it's an excused absence? Does it need to say that or no?
We did not classify.
Does not matter.
No. If they're out, they're out. It's often a child who's not returning with a notice, usually because the parent didn't give them one. And so we don't want a punitive system where kids.
Got it. Okay. I'm good.
Did we adjust anything with regard to Mark's issue about percentage grades? Because I have heard of teachers that only give 3 tests.
yeah, that's in there. There's a line in there that no assignment should be worth more than 30%.
Okay, that made it in.
Grade. But
Oh,
that's in
see,
the
I'm getting,
document.
it's so confusing. Okay.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. 11.04, Mr. Attorney, you want to go ahead and?
Matter before the board is the tentative approval of the following school board policies. And Mr. Chairman, in the interest of the fact this is just a tentative approval, we're going to read them all at one time for consideration. New policy 4.81, alternative school plans / programs. New policy 4.82, educational services and Department of Juvenile Justice programs. New policy 5.81, in-school discipline. Revisions to policies 5.32, zero tolerance for crime and victimization, 5.37, student uniforms, 5.33, bullying and harassment, and 5.4, suspensions. Suspensions, alternative disciplinary placement, and expulsion of students. If there's anyone here this evening that wishes to speak to any of those policies or their adoption, please come forward to the podium at this time. Mr. Chairman, I don't see one coming forward and believe it appropriate to close the public hearing.
Superintendent?
Recommend tentative approval of the following school board policies. New policy 4.81, alternative school plan programs. New policy 4.82, educational service and Department of Juvenile Justice programs. New policy 5.81, in-school discipline revisions to policies. 5.32, zero tolerance for crime and victimization. And 5.37, student uniforms. 5.33, bullying, harassment, and 5.34, suspensions, alternative discipline placement, and expulsion students.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Can I just ask, just clarifying, with the new uniform, we won't have all of these requests to waive school board policy, is that?
That's exactly right, yes.
Thank you.
This should be the last time you see those waivers. It was just the code hasn't been approved yet, and it was time for the waivers to be approved. So in the future, you won't see all of those, yes.
Great. I wanted to comment that the bullying policy, Ms. Dylan Banks, I know you worked with somebody that I sent your way. But what I noticed was it reads as if, in the case of a bullying incident, there will be an investigation, and that I don't think it doesn't read to me as if the parent has to force an initiation. Is that correct? Yeah. So it looks to me like in a case of bullying, that will happen automatically, as opposed to there having to be a parent who knows policy enough to figure out what to have the principal do. And I think that'll be much better for our kids who are bullied. So I really like that change.
All right.
That's all I have.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Mr. Johnson, 11.05.
Yes, sir. The matter before the board is tentative approval of the 2019-2020 Student Progression Plan. If there's anyone here this evening that wishes to speak to this matter, please come forward to the podium at this time. Mr. Chairman, I don't see anyone coming forward and believe it appropriate to close the public hearing.
Superintendent?
Recommend tentative approval of the 1920 Student Progression Plan.
So move.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I was excited to see the notes in there about the no grade worth more than 30% of the grade. I mean, if the state's not going to put that kind of pressure on a student, we shouldn't either. The note about recess as well. And so as I looked at this particular progression plan, there are a few kind of educational pieces that have to go with this. So I imagine, would you communicate those through Transformation Tuesday sorts of things, professional development? I mean, as we talk about, trying to continue to gain momentum in the redos, or how to properly or weight grades, or the topic of homework was another one that came to the board. For anybody who didn't watch the 4-hour workshop, this is probably the good stuff of that, right? So is that the next piece, an education, professional development piece for teachers, perhaps?
Yes, Dr. Weisskopf, please come up.
So the answer is a simple yes to all of those. I think we've got to start by communicating the changes. That would be important to note. I think we've got a few major ones that we probably need to filter out to all teachers, to all administrators, to make sure that they understand the changes. And then start by talking about the why behind it, and then do some work with furthering our understanding of grading and grading practices. And that's kind of a big push. We talked about that at the workshop, but beginning that education piece of it. So I think we've got some work to do there, but I also think that they're good changes for students and good changes for the way we want our schools to be in the future. So,
well done.
What's the recess change?
The recess change was that, and the past, because it's required by state that it cannot be taken away from students as a consequence.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't have my folder with me because Francis was going to speak on any changes, any specifics, but I don't know what.
So there was some clarifying language added that it would not be withheld.
It cannot be withheld as a consequence.
That
You'll find it in the
make in
PE.
statute.
It's the PE section.
I like
The statute's been there for a while. I think it's just a clarification of practice that maybe we need to clarify.
Okay, thank you.
All right. We've had a motion, second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. We now move to 11.06, and I'll turn this over to Mr. Johnson.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is going to be a ruling on several matters. Mr. Bradshaw, who's the Citrus County School Board Attorney, I've asked him to come tonight and represent your interests. It would be a conflict for me to do so because I'll be representing the superintendent in the district in this particular matter, so I'll turn it over to Mr. Bradshaw.
You can
Looked
sit
like
there.
Steve just got up.
Oh, yeah.
Apparently, you just sit there.
Come take Steve's
You
place.
get the warm chair.
You make less per hour than he does? No, come on up and take his place. You didn't want to.
He's scared of us.
We always kid him about his pay.
The answer is no.
Oh, okay. Don't be shaking out there, Steve.
And just to confirm, all of that we say is part of the transcript by the stenographer, is that correct?
Correct.
All right.
Everything that's said right now, for any appellate court reason, there's
Need you to use the mic.
I thought I was.
There you go.
Sorry. So everything that you say will be taken down by the court reporter verbatim in case there are any appellate issues. And so I would ask that you try to talk one at a time and be clear in what you're saying. Please speak into your mic, unlike what I do, and so that the court reporter can take down all the testimony that is here today. So you are here today, and I'd sent a memo to each of you in regard to the proposed recommended order. There was a proposed recommended order in the matter of Lake County School Board versus Kara Sanderlin, case number 18-6338 TTS, that was submitted on, I believe it was March 29th. And as the agency head, which is what the school board is in these types of matters on a DOA hearing, it is your job to review the recommended order and to, you have a couple of options. You can either accept the recommended order in its totality, or you may reject and modify portions of the recommended order if you would like to. If you are going to reject findings of fact, then you must find that the findings of fact that are contained in the recommended order are not based upon competent substantial evidence. And if you are going to modify the penalty that is recommended in the recommended order, then you have to state with particular reasons, particular facts and reasons on why you're rejecting the recommended order. The parties had an opportunity to file exceptions to the recommended order. The superintendent, through Mr. Johnson, did file exceptions to the recommended order, and you are required to go through each of the exceptions that were filed on behalf of the superintendent and to either reject them or if you reject all of them, then you're basically adopting the recommended order as per the administrative law judge, or to state why you wish to accept them, and then with particularity, state why. So does anybody have any questions at this particular time?
I've never done one of these. Have you guys?
Think of it like an appeal is really what it is. What ends up happening in these situations is you refer your disciplinary cases to the Department of Administrative Hearings. I believe I heard earlier that someone was going to be a hearing officer on something, so then that would come before the board, and kind of like the same process. So there was a recommended order that was issued by the administrative law judge, and I know that Ms. Challenger had the recommended order in all of the other documents, the hearing transcripts and all the exhibits that were attached or introduced into evidence at the hearing for your review.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, I don't think we've ever done one that's public, or at least I have never done a public.
because it's employee discipline, it would be public. If it was student, then it would be confidential under FERPA.
Okay,
So,
that's fine. Let's continue.
okay. So, the exceptions to the recommended order, there were, I think, 4 exceptions to the recommended order filed on behalf of the superintendent. Mrs. Sanderlin did not file, to my knowledge, any exceptions. Basically, when you do that, you're saying that they stand on what the recommended order states. The recommended order, and I can go through that if you would like, and then go through the exceptions that were filed, and then you can have discussion on the exceptions and state whether or not you're going to accept the exceptions and modify the order or not. I don't think I need to read the recommended order to you. I can, because part of what is in the recommended order are what the exceptions are about. But basically, in the recommended order, starting on page 8, which were the ultimate findings of fact, briefly said that a preponderance of evidence did not.
Board docs.
Do you know the basic underlying facts in regards to this matter, that Mrs. Sanderlin was accused of using a water bottle and either in a stream, either to basically to redirect autistic, nonverbal, non-communicative student in her ESE class. The ultimate findings of fact from the administrative law judge was that the preponderance of the evidence, which was the standard of burden of proof, did not demonstrate that she intended to use the streams of water to make direct contact with the student, but the preponderance of evidence did demonstrate that she directed streams of water to the side of the student in order to get him to comply with her verbal instructions, which throughout the course of the hearing, basically was for redirection. So the administrative law judge, there was basically 3 or 4 things that was in the charging letter. One was for misconduct in office, which is a violation of the Code of Ethics, a violation of the principles of professional conduct, and a violation of adopted school board rules pursuant to your policy. The school board adopted policy 6.301, principles of professional conduct. The school board adopted this policy on, I believe it was around September 14th of 2009, and you, per policy, stated that all instructional personnel and school administrators shall adhere to the principles of professional conduct for educational profession in Florida. And so the other charge was of incompetency, which was failure to communicate appropriately with and relate to students. And part of the charge was the violation of the principles of professional conduct, the principles of professional conduct for the educational profession. And hang on a second, I've got those. Sorry, I thought I brought those. Sorry, I did not bring. Do you have a copy of this, please? Thank you. Thank you very much. Which 6A10.081 1B states that the educator's primary professional concern will always be for the student and the development of the student's potential. The educator will therefore strive for professional growth and will seek to exercise the best professional judgment and integrity. 6A10.081C, aware of the importance of maintaining the respect and confidence of one's colleagues, of students, of parents, and other members of the community. The educator strives to achieve and sustain the highest degree of ethical conduct. 6A-10.0812A, Florida educators will comply with the following disciplinary principles. Violation of any of these principles shall subject the individual to revocation or suspension of the individual educator certificate or the other penalties as provided by law. Obligation to the student requires the individual to, 1, shall make reasonable effort to protect the student from conditions harmful to learning and or to the student's mental and or physical health and or safety. And paragraph 5, shall not intentionally expose a student to unnecessary embarrassment or disparagement. So that is where we are. The exceptions, and I don't know if Mr. Johnson wants to, and I believe Ms. Sanderlin's attorney may be here, although I have not met them. If they would like a brief opportunity to address the board, that would, and if the board chair will agree to allow them a brief opportunity to address the board.
If they're here. Okay.
So as before, there can be no more testimony that is taken. So this is pure, legal argument by the attorneys on behalf of the superintendent and on behalf of Ms. Sanderlin.
Just stating their case.
Correct. Yes, sir.
And I'll make it brief, Mr. Chairman. We filed exceptions in this case because the case really comes down to this is a situation that came before the superintendent where a teacher was redirecting a autistic nonverbal student by spraying a squirt bottle at them to make them go right, left, down the middle. Interestingly, in the recommended order and in the transcript of the hearing, there was never anybody said anything differently than redirecting a student using a water bottle was inappropriate. So how do you get to the result that the hearing officer came up with? It appears obvious to me that the hearing officer's whole point was that he felt that the punishment of termination was too extreme, and therefore he was going to decide to change that punishment to something differently. Well, if you'll notice, and we raise it in our exceptions, that the hearing officer goes in and says the only credible testimony is this one lady, but then there are two more, the teacher that comes into the ESE classroom and the aide that she comes with, I think it's the speech pathologist. Both of them said there was no doubt about it. They saw the teacher aiming a water bottle at the student. So he just avoids that whole discussion by saying, well, they must have been confused about what they saw. Well, there's no testimony that would have created any confusion in what they saw. They saw this student being redirected. Again, everyone, including the teacher at issue here, says that that is inappropriate to redirect a student with a water bottle. The transcript, if you read it, there's a whole lot of discussion, well, his shirt must have got wet going to use the restroom because, and the hearing officer that we raise in the first exception is that he wants to use the facts to make a difference between it was intentional or non-intentional or spraying at the student directly or to the right or left of the student. If you read the rest of the order and the testimony, it doesn't make any difference if it was intentional or not intentional to get him wet. The redirection was the threat of having water spray coming at him to make him turn right, left, or somewhere in between. The second exception was, as Mr. Bradshaw told you, that there was no violation of the principles because they're esoteric and just aspirational in nature. Well, this school board changed that by passing the policy that Mr. Bradshaw referred to that says that those principles are the rules and all of the instructional personnel and administrators will abide by the rule. The third exception, we're not really sure what that was trying to get to, what the hearing officer was trying to get to, because he kind of overlooks the whole discussion of the definition of misconduct and incompetent and doesn't really get, he just makes a blanket statement that it doesn't rise to the level of misconduct or incompetency without going into any explanation of what that might mean or might not. And we took exception to that as well. And the fourth thing of the four exceptions that we made were, he makes it quite clear, he says there's not just cause and this individual should be punished at some lesser level. Well, he can't do both. There is no doubt that there is law that supports the position that a hearing officer is not allowed to change the punishment, not allowed to change the penalty. The issue before the hearing officers was that whether there was just cause to terminate the employee based upon the facts. The facts were provided by all the witnesses there, and I don't think there's any different way to read this than what the hearing officer was trying to do, was trying to go both ways, saying, well, there are facts to support this, but there are two ladies who saw that it happened just the way that they claim it happened, that this action, no matter how it happened, whether you were spraying water directly at somebody or not, for a nonverbal autistic kid is inappropriate, and that there is a standard, and the principles of professional conduct for the teaching profession is that standard. This board has adopted that standard through its policy, and the facts are not, the facts that the hearing officer has are not supported and are merely an attempt to try to change the punishment and penalty of this particular employee without finding that there was a particular violation. So the superintendent, I think, believes very strongly in this, that under these circumstances, this kind of conduct cannot be tolerated, and that the hearing officer, in an attempt to try to rule both ways, made a mistake by saying that this individual, there's no evidence to support that they did this intentionally, but we think you should lower the penalties to just something less. How can you have a penalty if there's not some finding of culpability? And there was a finding of culpability, and the hearing officer was unwilling to put that in his recommended order. We think it's appropriate to amend the order to reflect those issues that come up, and to have the order reflect that this hearing the ruling coming out of this hearing should have been a recommended order for termination of this employee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Evening, members of the board. I'm Ms. Sanderlin's attorney, Mitchell Davis, and I'll try to keep my remarks brief as well. This is a case that, from the charging letter that was sent by the Lake County Superintendent through the course of the hearing, has morphed from a teacher intentionally spraying a student who was known to be afraid of water and adverse to water, in effect, punishing him in that way for not following instructions, to a case where termination is being recommended simply for using an unapproved method of redirection. I hope the board has had the opportunity to review some of the details of the case and the contents of the hearing transcript, to see that although there may have been some conflicting testimony, and as Mr. Johnson pointed out, some witnesses who believed that they saw a water bottle in the room, saw a student being wet, and made the connection that Ms. Sanderlin must have sprayed the student. That there was also testimony indicating that that didn't happen, that it wasn't seen by other persons who were in a position to see it on a regular basis, and that it did not occur the way that the superintendent and Lake County Schools had originally alleged. And as far as the legal standard to be applied to the ALJ's proposed order, that provides substantial competent evidence to support the ALJ's findings of fact, and for that reason we don't believe that the board should overturn those findings of fact. I'll also point out for the board that several of the items identified in the superintendent's exceptions as findings of law that the ALJ made were in fact in his order findings of fact, that the ALJ did not find that the original charges that the student was being sprayed as punishment were supported by the testimony, by the preponderance of the evidence, that the conduct that was proved and that came out in testimony did not, as a question of fact, constitute misconduct as it's defined in the relevant policies and procedures, did not constitute incompetence, and also did not disrupt the student's learning environment, that there were not facts to support those findings. And because the ALJ's findings of fact have to be maintained as opposed to findings of law, it's also our position that those would have to stand, and that with respect to Mr. Johnson, to the extent that the exceptions would overrule findings of fact as if they were findings of law, that those exceptions are legally infirm. And so it's our position that the exception should not be adopted by the board, but rather that the administrative law judge's original order, recommended order, should be adopted as originally prepared.
Thank you, sir.
All right, so the exceptions filed on behalf of the superintendent. The first exception is in regards to a finding of fact. The exception states that the ALJ found respondent directed streams of water to the side of the student in order to get him to comply with verbal directions, and that's in paragraph 22 of the recommended order. The ALJ states that any water that made contact with the student was inadvertent and not intentional. In making this determination, he states that Ms. Crinion and Ms. Phelps may not have seen what they thought they saw, which was a direct targeting of the student as a method of redirection. That's in paragraph 20. However, he finds that both Ms. Crinion and Ms. Phelps saw Ms. Sandlin use the spray bottle to redirect the student, and I'm just going to use the student instead of the initials of the student, if that's okay, although it is contained in the recommended order, the exceptions. Whether or not the respondent sprayed the student directly or to the side is irrelevant. The mere fact that Ms. Sandlin used the spray bottle to get the student to comply with verbal directions is redirections. Competent substantial evidence therefore demonstrates that the respondent redirected the student by spraying water in his general direction, which in the ALJ's own words is not, quote, an acceptable means of redirecting a student. So that is the first exception that the board has to rule on. You can only reject the findings of facts of the administrative law judge if it's not based on competent substantial evidence. So basically, the superintendent's exception is that the findings by the administrative law judge is not based upon competent substantial evidence because both Ms. Crinion and Ms. Phelps saw Ms. Sandlin use the spray bottle to redirect the student, and that the mere fact that she used the spray bottle to get the student to comply with verbal directions is a redirection. And so that is the competent substantial evidence, therefore demonstrates that the respondent directed the student by spraying water in his general direction, which in the administrative law judge's own words is not an acceptable means of redirecting the student.
I agree with that.
Okay.
So you
I guess we don't know what to move, or we're not sure of the, yeah.
I think you need to make a motion that you're going to accept the superintendent's exception to the administrative law and modify the order.
I move
So
that.
moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second.
Wait, I think you seconded your own.
No, he made the motion. I
Any
seconded.
further clarification? Seeing none? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The second exception is a conclusion of law filed on behalf of the superintendent, which states that the administrative law judge found the respondent's behavior was insufficient for termination for misconduct in office pursuant to Rule 6A-5.0562 due to a lack of violation of any of the disciplinary rules in Rule 6A-10.081, paren 2, close paren. Since he found no violation of the principles, he concluded there was no misconduct in office under Rule 6A-5.056, paren 2, close paren, paren B, close paren. However, in reading the conclusion, the administrative law judge ignored the school board, also charged the Ms. Sandlin with a violation of Rule 6A-5.056-2C for violating adopted school board policy, which is what I had read to you before, which constitutes misconduct in office. The board has codified the principles in School Board Policy 6.301, which specifically says, quote, all instructional personnel and school administrators shall adhere to the principles of professional conduct for the education profession in Florida, located in State Board of Education rules. Thus, the school board has made the principles in subsection 1 mandatory and not aspirational for all instructional personnel. Accordingly, a violation of any of the principles, including those charged against respondent, can be the basis for termination for misconduct. And just by way of what the administrative law judge says was that the first half of 6A-10.081 are aspirational, and the second part of it is gets more into the detail that that you shall use. I think the argument from the superintendent is that because you codified those rules, none of them are aspirational, that when you codified them, then they became the law of the school board and of the district, and you have required all your instructional personnel to follow those.
So moved.
Okay.
Move on the exception. Second.
Move on the exception.
We got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
The third exception filed on behalf of the superintendent is in regards to conclusion of law, that the administrative law judge found that the behavior was insufficient for termination for incompetency pursuant to Rule 6A-5.0563. As previously cited, incompetency is defined in relevant part as a failure to communicate appropriately with and relate to students. The exception clearly states that the use of a water bottle to redirect a student is inappropriate, and that's in paragraph 18 of the administrative law judge's recommended order. Using a water bottle to get a student to comply with verbal directions is an inappropriate method of redirection. Though not included in the recommended order, testimony by several witnesses at the hearing provided other more appropriate methods of redirection, including using incentives as reward for compliance, placing a hand over the child's shoulder, tapping on the desk, or getting on eye level. That's contained in the hearing transcript, page 20, lines 5 through 11, and page 21, lines 12 through 20, and page 53, lines 8 through 13. Accordingly, the use of an inappropriate method of redirection is a failure to communicate appropriately with and relate to students, which is a basis for termination for incompetency. So that is the exception that was filed on behalf of the superintendent in regards to whether or not.
To accept this exception.
Second.
Motion, second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
The last exception filed on behalf of the superintendent is that the administrative law judge that before the administrative law judge at the hearing was whether the school board had just cause to terminate Mrs. Sanderlin. Just cause is defined in statute to include, in relevant part, misconduct in office and incompetency, and that's Florida Statute 1012.331A. The definitions of misconduct of office and incompetency are found in Rule 6A-5.056, which is the Florida Administrative Code, also referred to as the state board rules for school boards. The ALJ's conclusion of law regarding respondent's violation of the principles as well as her level of incompetency focused solely on his determination that the respondent's actions did not, quote, rise to the level, end quote, of a violation of the disciplinary principles of subsection 2 or the definition of incompetency, and in doing so, the ALJ substituted his judgment for the appropriate level of discipline warranted for that of the school board. In general, deference is due to the school board decision with respect to its personnel decision, citing a case, Quiller versus Duval County School Board, 171 Southern 2nd, 745, at page 747, Florida 1st DCA 2000, and rehearing denied August 17, 2015. Furthermore, courts have little room to define what constitutes, quote, more severe acts of misconduct, end quote, against those responsible for running the county schools. It is therefore not the role of the court to substitute judgment as to which level of discipline it would impose on an employee. Rather, the court considers whether there was just cause based upon the evidence presented for the school board to impose the discipline. As Mr. Johnson stated in this case, the ALJ certainly found there was just cause for discipline as his final recommendation, including using a lesser level of discipline. Repeatedly stated that the respondent's actions were inappropriate. That's on paragraphs 22 and 23 of the recommended order. Thus, the ALJ found that there was an underlying basis for the school board's actions, though he disagreed as to the level of severity of the punishment. It's not the ALJ's role to decide the level of punishment is appropriate. Rather, it's the ALJ's job to determine whether there was just cause to terminate the respondent. Deference to the school board should therefore be awarded as to the level of discipline imposed.
Move to accept the exception.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
Okay. So I'm assuming that based upon the fact that you have accepted all of the superintendent's recommendations, that they were not, are exceptions, excuse me, and that the findings of fact by the administrative law judge was not based upon competence of substantial evidence, that you will want me to draft a new final order, and not, because you're not going to adopt the recommended order by the administrative law judge. Would that be correct?
Yes.
All right. So then I will draft a new final order. I will forward it to Mr. Johnson and Mr. Davis, and then I guess it will be brought back before the board for entry at a later date.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Johnson, is there anything else? Mr. Davis? All right. With that, I think that I am done.
All right.
Yes, thank you.
Yep. Thank you for coming in here.
Not a problem. Thank you for having me.
All right, as we make the transition, we'll be moving into our superintendent's report.
All right. First of all, I want to thank CenturyLink for their support of our teachers, and we're looking for some great STEM instruction in those classrooms thanks to the dollars that they were awarded this evening. I want to remind everyone that we are on our modified summer work schedule, so schools and district offices are closed on Fridays for the next several weeks. Our Treadway folks are here today, and I'm just thinking that they're probably here in support of their school-related employee of the year, Ms. Morgan, but I didn't see her here this evening. So if you'll please pass along our congratulations to her, and thank you for all your support of her and for being here tonight. I want to remind everyone that we have a teacher hiring event planned for next Thursday, June 13th. That is actually this Thursday, June 13th, from 9 to 12:30 at Leesburg High School. We're looking to hire guidance counselors, speech and language pathologists, school psychologists, and teachers. And so we're hoping that all those interested will come out, check out our website, and come out to Leesburg High School on Thursday from 9 to 12:30. We have several letters of condolences that went out since our last meeting. Bill Miller, one of our retired administrators, and his wife Linda Shepard Miller, principal at Lake Mineola High School. We sent a letter to them in the loss of Betty Miller, that is Bill's mother, who passed away. Robert Sherman, who's the principal at Astula Elementary, lost his father, James Schreckengost. Louise Parker, administrative assistant in our IT department, lost her sister-in-law, Deborah Boston. Jeff Williams, principal at Claremont Elementary, and Regina Peoples. Letters went to those families. Regina works in our procurement and contracting manager procurement services office. Julie Diana Peoples is the mother of Jeff Williams and the aunt of Regina Peoples. And also condolences to the family of George Light, custodian at Eustis High.
All right. Board member comments?
None.
Well, I just wanted to put my annual public service announcement out there for everybody to dash home, or if you're already home, jump on the Lake County Library website, and you'll find all sorts of great programs going on at your local library this year, whether you find reptile shows or guitar lessons or whatever it is, Pokemon leagues that get your kids into the libraries. And while you're there, please check out a great book, because I hear they've got at least a few stories worth reading. So fun thing to do this summer, read for pleasure, not have to take a test on it.
I wanted to thank you all for covering me while I had a very nice vacation. I very much enjoyed your marathon meeting all day today. And I also didn't get a chance to just shout out to Leesburg High School for their graduation. I see Mr. Sellis is here. And I'm always amazed when I talk to we're always on the stage with the administration, and how hard the administration at Leesburg High School works to graduate their kids and to get them to walk. I mean, they had one kid finish his last test at 6 o'clock that night, and then he walked. And I just love it. And I'm always like, actually, this year I was like, you guys should be standing where I am. Like, you need to be shaking hands. You're the ones who did the work. And so eventually some of them did come up and shake hands, because they worked so hard on trying to get each and every one of those kids. And it's just so impressive. And the attitude and excitement at Leesburg High was awesome. So I know all graduations are great, but I'm always touched by Leesburg. So and that's all I have.
All right, I have a couple items that we need to address tonight before we get, and just need a board consensus on this. Mr. Johnson, is that correct? I know, but just hit nod yes. On our value adjustment board, Ralph Smith has been serving for that, and I talked to him today, but if you have someone else, he said he would be willing to bow out if someone had someone else that was eager to do it, but otherwise, he'd be glad to do it.
He's a great appointee.
Okay, so everybody's in agreement with that? All right, also, you know that we now only have one FSBA member still. We're just changing positions, and so I need your permission to represent on the legislative committee.
You have my permission.
Since there's only one of us.
me.
Okay. All right, but just wanted to make that kind of official on that, but that way we take care of that. And I'd just like to say, since they are here this evening, we have Mrs. Christinas out there from Treadway that will be moving to Beverly Shores, and sitting beside her, I believe, is the new principal, Miss Vanessa.
Thank you for mentioning that.
And just something real quick in closing. I was at their graduation, or their promotion of their fifth grade, and she was in an auto accident that evening, and she made the comment when she finally was able to get there was nothing going to keep her from seeing this promotion take place. And to me, that stood out, that she went even through an auto accident, that she still was going to get there. So I'm glad that you're that dedicated. Thank you very much. And Superintendent, it will be leaving. I figured she would have told y'all. She's going to this FSBA thing, and I will be leaving Wednesday. Myself heading that way and be there representing Lake County this week. So other than that, also, Dr. Burns, I brought this to some attention. The next meeting, you will be the chair.
Oh, that's right. And for apparently a month, right?
Yeah, buddy.
I look forward to
I'll be out of state.
Enjoy.
I've got things to do this week. Next week, I'm at a youth camp, and then after that, I'm on vacation. So
have a great trip.
no other further business to take. We're adjourned.